Thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I'm Kevin Jeffries, President and CEO of the Leawood Chamber. And I'm just so pleased that so many of you can join us for today. I think we have about 60 folks sign up for this, a little over 60. So it's our biggest webinar to date, and I'm glad you could all join us. Probably has a lot to do with the caliber of our great speaker today. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with it. I want to thank our annual sponsors for the Chamber. Without their continued support, the Chamber would not have been able to continue to offer these great services that, like this event that we're offering today. Our 2020 presidential sponsors include Advent Health, Burns & McDonnell, Country Club Bank, CrossFirst Bank, Demdeco, and Menorah Medical Center. Also want to give a special thank you to today's event sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is CrossFirst Bank. Our series sponsors are Advent Health and Bucati Companies. And our supporting sponsor is Cosentino's Price Chopper. Their contributions to this event are greatly appreciated. I also want to thank my fabulous team members, Georgina, Deanna, and Trish, as well as my board member, Melanie Glassman, who have worked really hard to put this together. And I think this is going to be a great series, and I'm really excited for this new offering here from the Leawood Chamber. So I hope you guys will enjoy it. Now, before I turn things over to our presenting sponsor to say a few words, I want to have everyone mark their calendars. So I hope you have a pencil in hand. We have two more of these events coming up, one on July 8th. It includes representatives from Gales, Harley-Davidson, J.E. Dunn, and Mark I Electric. That's going to be a great panel. And then on October 1st, we have representatives from the Girl Scouts, the Kansas City Area Development Council, and 1KC for Women. Now, whether these will be webinars, I hope we'll be able to have these in person. That's the hope and the dream here at this point, but we just don't know yet. So I think you'll find today's webinar is going to be great, and I hope this will also be something you'll want to come back for the next one. So without further ado from my part, I'm going to welcome our presenting sponsor, Melanie Glassman. She's a relationship banking manager with CrossFirst Bank. So take it away, Melanie.
Sorry. Thanks, Kevin. I'd like to let everybody know a little bit about CrossFirst Bank and just kind of who we are and just kind of the history of the bank. At CrossFirst, our vision to serve the financial needs of our clients and passion for building relationships began in 2007 with a small group of experienced bank executives and business leaders. Over the last 13 years, we've grown to be the third largest bank headquartered in Kansas City by asset size. We've been recognized as the top 5 strongest large banks in Kansas City by the Kansas City Business Journal, top 10 in commercial loan growth by Kansas City Business Journal, top 50 fastest growing companies in Kansas City by Ingram's Magazine. CrossFirst Bank was founded in Leawood, Kansas, and over the past 13 years, we've expanded our operations to 7 full-service banking offices, primarily along the I-35 corridor. We've got locations in Leawood and Wichita, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, Tulsa and Oklahoma City in Oklahoma, and in Dallas, Texas. We have a full-service bank located at 135th and Row in Leawood, our corporate headquarters and banking center at 114th and Tomahawk Creek Parkway in Leawood, and our third location in the metro area is off 43rd and Main in the Country Club Plaza. We offer an array of convenient services for both your personal and business needs. Our service begins with their expertise and extends to establishing strong and reliable relationships that become the foundation for our success. Success starts with trust at CrossFirst. It's the core of our relationships and the basis for everything that we do. Nurturing that trust is key to providing our clients with specific solutions to deliver the best results for their financial goals. We realize that our clients deserve more than an ordinary relationship, which is why we were founded, to bring a level of service and trust to banking that can only be described as extraordinary. CrossFirst Bank is pleased to partner with the Leawood Chamber and our other sponsors to bring you this Women's Series. We hope through these events and discussions to motivate, inspire, and lead women to their next career opportunities. I have the honor today to introduce our keynote speaker, Denise Mills, the founder and chief mindset officer of the Leader Fuel Center. Many of you probably already know Denise as she's a consummate networker and very active in the Kansas City community. We invited Denise to speak today to kick off our Women's Series this afternoon because she works with both men and women leaders and leadership teams all over the world and consults with over 30 corporate internal women's networks nationwide, including Amazon, Visa, Toyota, Facebook, Honeywell, and DuPont, just to name a few. Locally, she facilitates the Executive Women's Roundtables and co-facilitates the Kansas City-based Central Exchange Emerging Leaders Program. Internationally, Denise facilitates leadership programs for the U.S. State Department to women who hold the highest ranking political title or position in their country. She's a spokesperson for the United Nations Celebrate Positive movement and a U.S. regional leader for the Lean In Foundation. On a daily basis, Denise works with both men and women leaders to help them become more effective in their leadership styles by becoming more self-aware of their beliefs, biases, and blind spots. Please join me in welcoming Denise Mills.
Thanks, Melanie. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you today. It's truly an honor to kick off this Women's Series, and I appreciate that CrossFirst Bank is one of the sponsors. It's just, these programs are so important to help women advance, and I know there's a lot of men on the call too, and I think that's invaluable as well. So I have a lot of friends that are on this call. I've been seeing you pop in my participant list. This is going to be very interactive. It's about 30-35 minutes. I think it's going to go very quickly. What I will do is share some insights about the differences of men and women and how we're socially conditioned and how that plays itself out in the workplace. The thing that I see when I work with women's groups and when I work with leadership teams who are primarily men is that behaviors of men are often misunderstood by women and behaviors of women are often misunderstood by men. So we're going to talk about that. But before I jump in too far, here's what I want you to do. I want you to open your chat box. And again, this is going to be very interactive. So open your chat box and make sure that you're in the area that it says type message here, that it's clicked on all panelists and attendees, because I want your responses to be able to be seen by everyone. So if you'd like, just say hello to everyone. So just type in there, hello, that you're here. That way we don't have to have our participant box. There it comes. Look at you guys. Look how good you are. All right. That's what I want to see. So I want you to be talking all the way through. Melanie's going to help me out by paying attention to the chats in case there's something that you want me to address that I haven't, or something that you wanted me to talk about. I'm going to start off a little bit and say that I'm going to start off with asking you for grace. And what I mean by that is I'm going to say things like women do this and men do this. And I know that it's not all women. There's a huge spectrum. There are many other aspects of men and women that are variables. There's generational differences, there's ethnic differences, there's how we were brought up. Many of you know I'm an Iowa farm girl, and that affects my perspective. It affects how I influence others, how I react to others' behaviors. So all of those are variables. So I just am asking you to give me some grace while we may be very much the same or look the same. We're all very different, and I know that. I'm going to tell you a lot of funny stories along the way. And a lot of the stories, I have so many stories. I mean, I work with groups every day. But I chose stories to tell you today that I hope shock you a little bit. And I want to shock you so that it causes you to pause and think. So here's just a quick story. This is how different and yet the same we are. So not that long ago, I had a male CEO of a large organization call me and ask me if I would call there was only one woman on his leadership team. There were about 16 men and one woman. And he said, hey, would you call her and talk to her? You know, I just feel like our relationship is strained, and she kind of has a chip on her shoulder. This is what he told me. And he said, could you just kind of find out what's happening with her? So I called her, and here's what she said. We talked a little bit, and then I asked her, like, so tell me about your relationship with the CEO. And the first thing she said is, oh my gosh, he's so condescending. And I said, really? I said, you know, what does he do that's so condescending? And she kind of leans in a little bit, and she gets real hushed about it. She kind of looks around like it's a big secret. And she says, oh my gosh, you'll never believe this. He opens the door for me. Yeah, that's right. He opens the door for me. And I thought to myself, like, oh, and what else? But she was so offended by him opening the door. And I asked her, I said, what's so offensive about that? My husband opens the door for me all the time. I interpret the behavior of opening the door as very gentlemanly. I find it very respectful. I like it. But she did not like it at all. And she said that the reason it bothered her so much is because it singled her out and he didn't hold the door open for any of the men. And it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say or to think about, but it strained their relationship to the point that she got a little huffy and he couldn't understand what he did. The more huffy she got, and this is his words, the more he tried to be nice to her and treat her with gentlemanly behaviors, all of which she found very patronizing. And so it's just a really interesting example of how easily the same behavior of opening the door can be interpreted by one woman as condescending and me, the other woman, as very gentlemanly. And those are the kinds of things I want to talk about today. So get your hands back on your keyboards as far as the chat. Here's my question to you. If I were to say to you, just describe women. Women are whatever, men are whatever. Type something in the chat. Women are, and then fill in the blank. What comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind? Oh, I'm loving what I'm seeing so far. Yeah. So I see, you're not saying necessarily men or women, but I'm going to see, here's my own belief and bias, but I see words like gentle, and I know you can see all these too, but gentle and creative, emotional, I'm guessing those are women. Those are attributes of women. How about men? Men are, and now fill it in. So when you think of men, male leadership, what do you think about? Square, black and white. I mean, you can see these different, and I'm reading them because I know there's people that are on a call with us and they can't see the chat box. So there's a good statement from Jill. They often miss the subtext or personal cues. And again, I'm guessing that's men often. And you can see just how biased we are because when we say certain words, we already know that's a male attribute or a female attribute. Okay, now, you know, and I know that chambers really value networking and create great networking opportunities. So now here's something fun. I want you to type in, just think about stereotypical attributes of men and women, and I want you to type about what stereotypical attribute does not fit you. So for example, you might be a man who cooks. And so you might have, that would be kind of counterculture by the stereotype. And again, stereotypes are based on patterns. So Kevin's saying he's not a huge sports fan. So again, the assumption is when guys get together, they're going to talk sports. And Kevin's like, not really into sports. But he's male, and that's an assumption. So this is your opportunity to allow others to get to know you. So tell us something about you. Jill, you and I are going to have to talk. I speak plain English. You're going to have to tell me what plain English means. So Cindy, you like to shop. I'm guessing that, I mean, that's what I would call that a stereotypical female attribute. Okay, Debbie, I see you like to watch football. So again, when women like to watch sports and men don't, we would almost call that counterculture. And you can see several things. Again, this is a way that you can connect and network with each other while not actually being visible. I'm watching several of the, Courtney, you must be blonde and therefore not a ditzy blonde like the stereotype, right? So let me tell you about some of the stereotypes that happen at work. So women are typically described as helping and organizing, and men are typically described as leading or directing. Women tend to fit in and get along, and men tend to stand out and compete. And all of this plays a role in how we interact at work and how potentially we can be misunderstood or misinterpreted. I think the women out there, and again, I know that not all women and not all men are this, but women have a propensity to ruminate over things and worry, whereas men, on the other hand, have this ability to just sort of brush things off. So again, it's just very different. So I'm going to ask you, where did you get your beliefs? Like, how is it that you are the way you are? No doubt your family experiences, maybe experiences at work, just social interactions, but how did you become the way that you are? And a lot of it comes from social conditioning. I love this quote. I think it's very true that as soon as we say it's a girl or it's a boy, right away we have expectations of how they should be. For example, if you've ever shopped for a newborn outfit and you go into almost any department store or Target or Walmart, any place like that, you are going to walk into the girls' section, and what are you going to see? You're going to see mostly pink. And what else are you going to see? What's on the t-shirts? And again, use the chat because you know the answer to this. What's on girls' t-shirts? Melanie, I see you chat. Yeah, Scott, you're right. Frilly, flowers, yes. Okay, words, yes. Unicorn, rainbows, right? Princess, okay. All right, what's on the boys' t-shirts? Baby boy t-shirts. So again, this social conditioning, we have to remember, plays itself out in the workplace. So men tend to be more competitive. Women tend to give in quicker. It is stereotypically known that women tend to be the caregiver and men tend to be the breadwinner. And again, not all men, not all women, but those are the stereotypes and the patterns. So here's some counterculture things. And these are examples of friends of mine who are very irritated when they share this about themselves and people question it. So here's one. So a woman who out-earns her husband. Usually the men won't want to talk about that because there is a pride aspect about it. And if the women do talk about it, they're not usually believed. And it's irritating. It's irritating to them. Here's one, a family who relocates. So I have a girlfriend who is an executive and she relocated to Australia. And when she tells the story of our family relocated to Australia, the first thing people say to her is, what does your husband do that caused you to be relocated to Australia? And she's like, no, we relocated for my job, not his. And usually she gets really bristled about that. Well, again, that's just a counterculture stereotype. Stay-at-home dads are also a counterculture. A woman who is in a male-dominated industry, that would be counterculture. Also, a mom who travels for business. And the reason that I'm mentioning these things is because when you share this in a networking environment, just like a typical chamber event, what often happens is you feel judged. Like if a woman travels, a mom in particular, travels for business, they feel judged, and then they start to feel guilty, yet they love their work and they're a great mom. But there's a societal judgment about things like that. And again, it plays itself out in business, where it plays itself out in how we treat others. So often we treat each others like we want to be treated. It's the golden rule, except the platinum rule is we should treat others the way they want to be treated. So if I appreciate candidness and directness, then I want you to be candid and direct. But as a female, men tend to downplay their directness to women because interestingly enough, they're afraid we're going to cry. So they don't want to hurt our feelings. Let's say they're giving us feedback, corrective feedback at business, for example, and they don't want to hurt our feelings. So what do? They downplay it. And therefore I'm like, oh, it seems like everything's okay. And later I might get a more direct or more corrective action. And I might say, well, why didn't you tell me? and they think they did. They just downplayed it because they didn't want to hurt my feelings. So I'm sharing a lot of different things with you, trying to move through it somewhat quickly because I know you're thinking as fast as I'm talking. Already in this short time, I am guessing that you have thought things like, well, that's not like me. You said women are this, and that's not really me. Or I'm not really seeing that out where I'm at. I'm in an environment where I don't really see the gender differences. Or you might say, I have not heard that. I've not really heard some of what you're sharing. I would just challenge all of you that those in themselves, just thinking that might be blind spots. All of this plays out. So Melanie mentioned in the introduction, I facilitate for the Central Exchange along with Robin Sternick. So we co-facilitate a program called Emerging Leaders. We have 97 women in the program this year, and they are in about, they're about 2 steps away from an executive role. And it's so interesting to hear what they are concerned about and what their needs are. When we ask them at the beginning of the program, what are your expectations? What's the best thing that we can do for you over this year? The women say things like, I need to build my confidence. They'll say, I need to learn how to self-promote without sounding braggadocious. I need to be more strategic. I need to deal with conflict better. I need to learn how to delegate, and life balance always comes up. So those are women's expectations. Now, on the other hand, when I'm with leadership teams, and these are Fortune 200 companies, most of the people in the room are men. There might be 1 or 2 women for every 10 or 15 men. So I'm going to say 1 to 2%, or excuse me, 10 to 15% are women. And when I ask the question, what are your expectations in this leadership development program? What's the best thing that I can do for you? The things that, the list I just shared with you does not come up. About the only overlap is they want to learn how to deal with conflict, and they want to give better feedback. But outside of that, when I'm typically with all men's groups, they want to know about strategy and growth, and they want to know about how do they get more out of their teams. So you can see just the differences at work and what the needs are between both men and women. So, okay, now that all being said, we're going to do a quick activity. And again, I need your hands on the keyboard. I'm going to throw a phrase up on the screen. Here's the phrase. And we're just going to see all the different perspectives that come out of this one phrase. So read the phrase, and a picture will pop into your head. Type into the chat, what's the first thing that popped into your head when you read this phrase? Okay, I'm going to take it away. And you can see just a few. Kevin, we'll slow down. I'll go back to the phrase for you. Okay, look at that phrase again. Pick a word, pick any word. It's not necessarily sensical, let's call it that. Now you're starting to correct the grammar in the phrase. Okay, so you can see a couple of different things that are in the chat. Initially, it came up with paper or files, or Deanna even mentioned taxes. So those are 3 very different things out of just one phrase. So this is just an example of how you can all be reading the same thing and see different things. Some people will say things like, when I see it, I focus on the word scientific, and that brings to mind a laboratory. So sometimes people will say a laboratory, or they'll say the actual scientist, for example. So they'll picture a person, and then I'll even ask, so if you think about a scientist, and you think about a scientist, and I want you to type this in the chat, what does a scientist look like to you? What does a scientist look like to you when you picture it? Yeah, so look, you see old man, white jacket, glasses. Cindy says her daughter-in-law, so she doesn't picture old man, she pictures her daughter-in-law. Look at the unique perspectives just simply based on a word, okay? These types of unique perspectives is the entire case for diversity. If the problem that we were focusing on, if this statement is, what are we going to do as we transition back into the workplace from being in a stay-at-home or shelter-in-place order, we need diversity for all different types of problem solving. We need the different ideas. Okay, so now I'm going to do something different with this. I want you to look at the phrase again, and I want you to count. I'm going to clear your minds, and we'll do this a little differently. But I'm going to bring the phrase back up, and I want you to count how many F's, F as in the letter Frank, you see on the screen. So how many F's are in the phrase, and type it in the chat. Okay, there goes the numbers. Now check out the chat box. You're all looking at the same thing, but I see everything from 2, 3, 4, 5. You're all looking at the same thing. Okay, now I can say to you, try harder. See if you can see them. But trying harder won't help you. Trying harder won't help you. Now, let me tell you why we see so many different, like, again, you're counting F's. And I think if I go backwards, if I do this, this is what an F looks like. Is that backwards, or do I need to go this way? But the letter F, okay? So here's why it matters. If you look at this phrase, if you are a fast thinker, you will see finished files, and you'll go, yep, found them, there's 2, and you'll be done, okay? And many men, and if I had to go look through the scrolling, and I took all the men versus the women and so forth, most men will go finish files, there's 2, I'm done, good enough, okay? Women tend to be more thorough. They might see 4 or 5. The correct answer is 6. And again, some of you can't still see them. One of the reasons you can't see them is in the very beginning, I asked you to read the phrase and picture something, and what you missed were the ofs, the OF. Do you see them? Yeah, some of you, I wish I could see your faces right now, because often what happens is people are like, oh my gosh, like there they are, where were they? They were there the whole time. This is called a blind spot, or in Greek, it's called a scotoma. Yeah, it's a little disconcerting, right? This is also why we need diversity, not just gender diversity, but all types of diversity on our team. We need diverse experiences. We need diverse lifestyles. We need diverse genders. We need diverse maybe I said experiences. That's so important. And of course, gender, because we come from problem solving in a completely different way, and we are going to get better outcomes, better results. The phrase is relatively nonsensical, okay? But interestingly, there are 6 F's, and they're not always easy to see. Here are some other blind spots that happen at work. And I think your faces, I love this little girl's face on this slide, but I think your face is probably, for those of you who didn't see all 6 in the beginning. But here are some differences that play themselves out at work. I'm not going to read through all of them, but men tend to be, and listen to my language, you tend to be known for being linear in your thinking. So you prioritize in sequence, and women tend to multitask. And if no other example, and most women probably will agree with me, my husband and I are so stereotypical, we fall into these patterns that when we go to the mall, he will go directly to the store for what he needs, and now he's done. He buys what he needs, and he's done. I will go from store to store to store, shop around, okay? That's our difference in him being linear and prioritizing, and me being more social about how we shop. You can see how it plays itself out. Now look at the difference. Men like to be singled out, so men want acknowledgement and recognition for a job well done. But often you will hear when you celebrate a woman for a job well done, she'll right away push the compliment away and say, it wasn't me, it was my team. And right away she brings the whole team into the accomplishment. But often you will never know. If you just listen to the words that the man is saying, you would never know he had a team. He will say, I did this. Well, he certainly didn't do it all by himself. He had a huge team and maybe even a whole organization, but he will tend to use the word I. Men, okay, so here's what's also interesting. Look at lead by telling versus lead by asking. Leadership styles, again, very stereotypical. Here's why this matters. If I am a woman and I am leading, I will bring the problem to my team and I will say, so team, what do you think? This is my way of leading. But if I am, so I'll say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And I will collect information and then collectively, we will make a decision as a group, okay? If you are a man on my team, you're kind of looking at me weird, like, well, don't you know what to do? Why are you asking us? You're the leader, just tell us what to do. If you are a woman on a male team, a male-dominated team, and the man says, we have a problem, he's gonna say, you need to go do this, and you need to go do this, and you need to go do this, and bring it back to me, and then we'll figure out collectively what to do next. And you as a woman on that team might be a little offended or a little taken aback and say, you could have asked me what I thought instead of telling me what to do. And so right away, we get sort of an irritation or a frustration between two people at work. These behaviors are just sort of natural behaviors for any individual, but they often create misunderstandings and often create irritations, frustrations, and potentially disengagement. And that really matters, disengagement. So you can see some of the others. I want to say this because it's on this slide purposefully. Men are unintentional when they exclude women. I have talked to, this is no exaggeration, hundreds of men, and actually have interviewed them for projects because the women are saying, you know, they exclude us all the time. Why do they exclude us? Go talk to the men and find out, why do they exclude us? And the men are always shocked when I tell them what exclusion means. And here's just a quick example. A group of men will get together for lunch, walk past the woman's office and go to lunch together and not invite her. They think they're being respectful. They think they don't want to hurt her feelings by having her feel obligated to go with them because they know she doesn't want to go to lunch with them. They talk about guy things. So they think they're being respectful and they would say, we're out of respect, we didn't invite you. But the woman, on the other hand, feels extremely excluded and disrespected. Again, these are just a couple of simple examples, but they play themselves out in business all the time. Men tell me all the time they hate it when women cry. I just tell them, you know, pause. And if you give feedback to a woman and she tears up, just be patient. Those tears will pass. If she is uncontrollably sobbing, then you might just reschedule the meeting. But women need to learn how to manage their emotions. We want tough feedback, but then when we get it, we're like, oh, it kind of stung a little bit, but we ultimately do want it. So I'm going to mention a couple of other things, and then we're going to go to question and answers. And you will have a question and answer box. There's a separate Q&A box that if you have questions, I want you to put it in that Q&A box so they don't get lost in the chat, okay? But here's a couple of other things. This is when two beliefs that are stereotypically men or stereotypically women come together and converge and kind of clash. And this is what happens. One of the things women complain to me about is being talked over or interrupted in a meeting. And here's what happens. Men don't mean to do it. Again, these are unintentional behaviors. But what happens is they have a belief that they just know. They just believe they know the answer and that they know better. And secondly, they believe women need help. And excuse me for saying this out loud, and again, give me some grace here, but they do believe that women are inferior in a way. And they believe that they are superior in ways. And in that way, that belief itself clashes. And the next thing you know, they will interrupt. I had a girlfriend tell me one time, a man tried to correct her in how she pronounced her own name. Her own name. He's like, you're pronouncing it wrong. She's like, it's my name. I know, I've lived with this my whole life. But that's called mansplaining. That's when a man, and if you haven't heard that language, it's actually kind of humorous and there's a lot of examples. It happens all the time on talk news where there's commentary. Men will explain and talk over women. Just watch any news show tonight and notice how many times, just count how many times the men interrupt the women, okay? They don't realize they're doing it. They're not doing it intentionally, but it happens. And for women, it's extremely frustrating. I'll tell you a quick story about another thing that has happened. I mentioned earlier, women don't tend to self-promote. It's very uncomfortable for women to self-promote. In fact, they downplay their own accomplishments. It's very, very common. And the reason I want to tell you this story is I think this plays itself out in a couple of different ways. There was a law firm here in Kansas City that had one partner seat available. And they had two candidates, a male candidate and a female candidate. The female candidate had been with the firm longer. She was better qualified. She had a bigger book of business and was a better technical expert. The male was younger. And bottom line is the male got chosen for the partner seat. The woman afterwards went to go talk to those that were making the decision and said, what happened? Why didn't I get it? And they even acknowledged she was a better technical attorney. She had more experience. She had a bigger book of business. All the data showed that on paper, if you wouldn't have looked at the male or female name, that the woman should have gotten the partner seat, the one seat that was available. But what they told her, and they had no idea until it came out of their mouths how poorly it sounded, but they said, well, he's asked for three different times, and this was the first time you had asked. So we gave it to him because we were afraid he was going to leave and we knew you wouldn't leave. And that sounds appalling. I mean, it really sounds appalling, but I hear that kind of a story over and over and over where women are overly loyal. So I'm going to wrap up here so that we have time for questions. I want to just give all of you, but particularly the men on this call, an only challenge. Women are often the only woman in the room. They will walk into a room and depending on the industry, depending on if they're on a leadership team, they are often the only woman. And men can't really understand how that must feel. So men, here's what I would challenge you to do. I want you to become an only in a room. Back when we're able to be out in public again, I want, if you're a white male, I want you to go to a predominantly black church and feel what it feels like to be different than everyone else. If you are a male, go to a female event where you are one male to 50 women, okay? And I would ask you the question, do you behave slightly different when you're an only than your normal patterns? Do you hold back slightly? Do you sort of get lay of the land before you just jump right in and be your normal self? The answer is probably yes. Men all the time ask me, senior men, ask me to encourage the only woman on their team, to speak up. And the reason the women are hesitant to speak up is because they know they're an outsider. Think about, for any of you who are married, at some point you were the outsider to your spouse's family. And how that felt. Initially, you're kind of hesitant, you're kind of getting lay of the land, and now years later, you're just part of the family, right? But you had to learn how to adapt, okay? That's how women can feel. So here's some things that men can do and women can do that will help them be more effective and more successful at work. Women, find your support group and network across the organization. I have what I call my Attagirls for women. So women, something that you can do is actually make a list of things that you're particularly proud of, successes you've had at work. I call those my Attagirls. And when I know I'm going to walk into a particularly difficult situation, I look at my Attagirls that are past successes. And if I have those past successes in my head just before I walk into the meeting, I can feel myself a little more confident. If I walk into that meeting distracted by, let's say, a problem, or if someone criticizes me or something like that, any of that kind of thing, I'm going to walk in being less confident and be full of self-doubt, and therefore I'm going to behave differently, full of self-doubt, than I would behave if I were confident. Women, share your aspirations with many. Get mentors. Absolutely get mentors. They don't have to be formal mentors, informal mentors. Ask people for advice. I will tell you, one of the biggest mistakes I made early in my career is I was afraid to ask people for advice. I was afraid to bother them. Anybody older than me, smart, and this was, I assessed everyone as smarter than me, more experienced than me. I was intimidated by them. I should have asked for advice earlier on in my career. Now I know that asking for advice is more of a sign of wisdom and less of a sign of being weak, but I interpret it differently. Men, here's what you can do to help women. What you can do is you can encourage women. If you have an only woman in a meeting, encourage her to share her thoughts. You might even respectfully call her out. Don't put her on the spot, that's different, but respectfully invite her to say, like if Melanie were that only woman in the room, I would say, Melanie, what do you think? You know, you've been quiet, I'd like to know, and give her a moment to think, because if she's an introvert, she needs some time to think. They engage women and invite them, because otherwise they will tend to be quiet. Invite women to meetings that they might not otherwise be invited to. What I mean by that is expose them to other parts of the business to expand their awareness of the organization, because, and this is really men and women, invite junior people into senior leadership meetings whenever appropriate, which will allow them to be a better contributor at their level. They just don't know what happens in those meetings. It will make them a better contributor, make them more effective. It will motivate them because you invited them. All of those are just really healthy ways of engaging others. Okay, that was a lot in a short period of time. I hope that you have questions. I'm going to pause. I can see there's a question. So I'm going to take a second to read this. Melanie, actually, do you want to unmute yourself? It would help me if you just ask the question.
Sure. We have two different questions. One, okay. The best advice you've received in your career.
Okay. So the best advice I've ever received? Wow, that's a good question. I have received a lot of advice over the years, which I have appreciated greatly. I think a piece of advice that was hard for me to accept, even though I knew it was important, was I needed to be better at self-promoting and self-marketing myself. I still don't do that well. I appreciate my network. My network feeds me business. I mean, we've worked hard to get to where we are, and we get a lot of calls, so we don't have to ask for business like we would have had to earlier in our careers. But when we were building the business, I could go out and network. I could go out and talk about great stories about things we did, but to actually self-promote and talk about ourselves as experts, I struggled with that, and I was told I needed to do that more.
I have another question. Oftentimes, I believe you have to create your own narrative, the things you want people to know about you. What are some ways to bolster your story to set yourself up for success?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think networking provides a great opportunity, a great environment to practice your story. And I think it takes practice. So I have taken the time to write out the narrative. So I would ask it like this. My question is, how do you want to be known? And then the stories that you tell should align with how you want to be known. But often we tell stories that we feel good about, or I'll give you a simple marketing example. A simple marketing example would be a realtor who tells a story about helping somebody who had really bad credit, maybe a bankruptcy, and they were just really proud how they helped this family who was kind of getting back on their feet into their first home. If they tell that story too often, they're going to get a lot of other business like that, which is not always desirable and takes a lot of extra time. So they've got to balance that with telling stories about the types of homes that they've sold that align with the types of people that they want to work with, the price point that they want to work in, and so forth. It's the same thing for all of us in corporate, from the standpoint of what kinds of stories are we telling about ourselves, And I think it's also important to, this is where the tribe comes in, is bounce it off your friends. Get together with a group of girlfriends, practice your friends, a very safe environment, and then share like, hey, that sounds a little this or a little that. You might want to tell this story more. You might want to amplify this part of your story. That's a great way to amplify those stories and practice. I think it takes practice for women to be able to tell their stories well.
How do you avoid men from mistaking your passion for being emotional?
It's a really common question that comes up. So here's what I'm a proponent of. This is what works for me. If I can feel that emotion bubbling up because I am very passionate about something, I'll just state it. I might state, you might be interpreting, right? And I use the language of observation, interpretation. You might be interpreting right now that I'm very emotional, but the reason I'm speaking so quickly, or the reason that you hear me elevating my voice, I'll point out the observable behavior, and then I'll say, it's because I care. And then I tell them why I should care. So the other thing, and back to that narrative question, is I have learned to tell people the why. So this is why I care. This is why it matters. It matters because I care. If I didn't care, I would just be quiet. But I'm passionate and emotional about this because it matters to me, and you should be glad that I'm this passionate because I'm going to put my all into it. If my energy was low, you're probably not going to get as much out of me. State it.
So you mentioned earlier in your talk that women should ask for mentors or seek advice.
Yep.
Do you recommend a male mentor for a woman? Why or why not?
So I recommend that women have, and men too, but women in particular aren't as good at it, is they need to seek out mentors and have multiple mentors. So first, so start like this. Start with, what do you need to learn? What would you like to learn from a mentor? Because I have a lot of different mentors, but I have mentors that help me. For example, years ago, I sought out a mentor because I was invited onto one of my first boards. And I wanted to be able to be more comfortable reading financials. That just wasn't a skill I had. So I sought out a particular mentor to help me understand financials. And I asked him, like, I told him exactly what I needed. Here's what I need from you. Can you help me with that? I didn't really say, I want you to mentor me. I just asked him to help. Just help me. So seek out, yes, male and female mentors. Something I didn't mention earlier, women have the same biases about women as what men have about women. So here's an interesting example. A young woman had a female mentor who worked in the same organization, a more senior level woman. And that senior level woman observed the younger associate and told her that she felt like she spoke about herself a little too much. And I happened to be there in the same environment as well. And the young woman asked, and so she got feedback from the mentor, and she asked me later if I felt that she had done that. And I said, no, I didn't notice it at all. But what I believe wholeheartedly is the amount of advocating, or let's say marketing, that the younger woman did about herself made the older woman uncomfortable because she's not good at it. And I know her well. I believe wholeheartedly that was the case. But the criticism she gave to the younger woman was it was too much, but it was too much for her, for the older woman. And so I think we need to get a variety of perspectives. It's just like in business, small business. As I was building my business, I went to several other successful entrepreneurs and asked them for advice. But I got conflicting advice because they came at me from different perspectives. And that served me very well, because I could say, okay, that doesn't fit me in my style, but this over here does fit me. And if you ask any entrepreneur, what if you're building a business, what you should do, they will tell you, but they will tell you their way. But there's 20 different great ways. And we need to remember that when we're getting advice from a mentor. Remember that it's advice. It's up to you to choose to act on it.
We have another great question. What should a man do if he's the only one in his work team, i.e. all women, including his boss? So complete role reversal.
Yeah. Here's what I would say is I would say the very same thing that women should do. One of the things that we didn't talk about was we didn't talk about the importance of bringing these conversations up. So if you as a man feel uncomfortable by just the way the women are interacting, then I think it's really healthy to bring it up. Sometimes you can just bring it up to, you know, are other people noticing? Sometimes you can bring it up in a group, and, you know, if it's a small team and it's a close-knit team, then I think it's really great in a more safe and social environment to talk about work differences and bring it up. And what you will find is the male differences also could be a style difference. So we didn't talk about extroverts and introverts, but that in itself creates different style differences. But it all just depends on how you as a man are feeling. And I'll go back to observation interpretation. If you feel, and this goes for the only woman too, if you feel something offensive happened in the room, privately after the meeting, I would go schedule a short meeting, 10 minutes, with the person who was offensive to you, because it was a personal interpretation. And I would go in, and let's say, Melanie, you were that person, because I'm going to use you as just this role play. I would say, Melanie, in that meeting, you said this. It would be a factual observation. I observed you saying this, or you said this. It's factual. And I interpret that to be, or others might interpret that to be. And then I put my interpretation. So I interpret that to be very disrespectful or very condescending. And I own my interpretation. And I'll say that, like, look, I own this. It's my feeling. And I want you, Melanie, in that interaction to tell me, did I take ownership of your behavior and say, oh, Denise, no, I'm so sorry. I had no idea that was offensive to you. Well, I'm concerned that not only was it offensive to me, but it might be offensive to other people in the room. And I knew that you would want to know. I don't hold it against you. I don't judge you for it, but I'm co-responsible if I don't bring it up. If I let the behavior continue, if it's in my mind, in my opinion, bad behavior, then I am somewhat co-responsible for not bringing it up, because it could be very, very unintentional, and more often than not, I find it is. Bring it up, but you need the toolkit to be able to bring it up. And you see on the screen right now, I have several of my favorite books. There's some great tips and tools in here. My email address is on the screen too. If you have a particular issue at work that's particularly difficult, I would welcome you to email me and just ask. I am more than happy to set up time with you and just talk it through, because I recognize that I move through a lot of information quickly, but also there's so many unique scenarios. And I'm noticing time, and I see, oh, I saw, thank you. You're welcome. So I'm going to pause, because I know that we want to wrap up just before 5 o'clock, and we're getting close there. So there's my thank you. Melanie, thank you to you for sponsoring, for you helping me out and reading chats while we were going through this. I want to thank Kevin and his entire staff at the Leawood Chamber. You guys really are remarkable and amazing and outstanding. You were terrific in setting this all up, and I appreciate, and I know, Melanie, you had a lot to do with this as well, but I appreciate you kicking off this women's series, because there are programs designed for women, and often I hear, you know, why do we need programs just for women? The answer is because we're different. That's why. We're different, and there can be programs just for men. If you want one, ask for it, and you can get it too. So that's my wrap up. Kevin, I'm talking it to you.
Thank you for handing it off to me. And Denise, thank you so much for this great presentation. You know, speaking of Denise in the chamber, at my very first chamber event that I ever held at Arlene Ladegaard's, you remember that, Denise?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Many, many years ago, like we won't even talk about how many years ago that was.
A few years ago, yes.
Yes, that's where I met Denise, and we've stayed good friends for that long of a time. And so I'm so happy that you were able to join us today and share some of this. You probably would have enjoyed seeing the banter that my staff and I were sending around about, well, you know, it was good. So it was good to have that conversation. And And we are recording this today, so I hope that we can figure out a way to share this with folks, maybe in your various organizations, if they'd like to watch this in the future. So thank you so much. This was great.
I hope it was helpful to everyone. And again, any feedback, toss it in the chat box, because I appreciate the feedback. And like any female, I ruminate on, is it okay? Did you get what you needed? What did I help? So thank you. Thanks for all your active participants too. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Denise. And we look forward to seeing all of you at our next one in early July. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. And Melanie, thanks again.